One image, 11 archived copies, 6 different file hashes, and every single one of them claims to be the original. The person who found it wasn't looking for a mystery. His name online was Cartwright_Diggs, a username he'd been using since the early 2000s on various lost media forums. For about 15 years, he'd spent his spare time doing something most people wouldn't consider a hobby, archiving personal websites before they disappeared. Not famous websites, not historic ones. Just the ordinary personal pages that populated the early web. Hobbyist blogs, small community forums, family photo galleries. The kind of sites that existed before social media made self-expression centralized and standardized. He'd saved thousands of them. Most of them contained nothing anyone would ever search for. He saved them anyway. In March 2021, while working through a batch of cached pages he'd pulled from 3 different archive services, he noticed something. A photograph appeared on all 3 versions of the same page. He downloaded all 3 copies. They looked identical. He almost moved on. What stopped him was a habit he'd developed over years of this work. Before filing anything away, he'd run a quick visual comparison between versions of the same file, looking for subtle differences that indicated a page had been quietly edited between archive captures. He opened all 3 copies side by side. For a few seconds, he saw nothing unusual. A building exterior, concrete facade, a narrow road, overcast sky. The image was small and the resolution was low, which is typical for photographs uploaded to personal websites in the early 2000s. Then he zoomed into the lower left. One of the 3 copies had something in a ground floor window, a shape, too ambiguous at that resolution to identify. It could have been a reflection, an object placed on the sill, or a person standing just inside. But it was there, clearly present, taking up a portion of the window frame. In the second copy, the window was empty. In the third copy, the window wasn't there at all. He posted the comparison to the forum that same night with a single line of text. Same file, 3 archives. Can anyone explain this? The first responses were confident. JPEG compression was the obvious answer. Anyone who's worked with images knows that JPEG is a lossy format. Every time a JPEG is saved or re-uploaded, the algorithm discards information to reduce file size. Over enough generations of compression, detail disappears. The effects are well documented and visually distinctive. They deterred 2 people in the thread, ran tests. They took a sample JPEG and deliberately degraded it through multiple compression cycles, documenting the results. The results were posted the following morning. Compression artifacts don't behave the way the differences in these images behaved. Compression creates blocky patterns, color bleeding, edge smearing. It degrades everything uniformly. It does not selectively make you remove a window from a concrete facade while leaving the surrounding wall crisp and clean. The compression explanation was ruled out within 24 hours, which left the thread with a problem it hadn't expected. What the researchers were seeing wasn't compression degradation. While the compression debate was running, someone had been doing something more methodical. A user called R_H_archive, who described themselves in their forum profile only as digital preservation 15 years, had pulled all 3 image files and run them through a hashing tool. A hash is a digital fingerprint. Feed a file through a hashing algorithm, and you get a unique string of characters that corresponds exactly to the file's contents. change even a single pixel and the hash changes completely. It's how investigators verify whether two files are truly identical. All three copies of the image produced different hashes, not variations, not partial matches. Three completely distinct fingerprints, meaning three genuinely different files whose contents differed at the binary level. R_H_archive posted the results without commentary. The thread went quiet for about 4 hours. Then Cartwright_Diggs replied, "If anyone else has this image, please run it." Over the following 2 weeks, 8 more copies surfaced. They came from CDN mirrors, personal hard drives, a backup service that had been defunct since 2014, but whose archives had been partially preserved by a volunteer and, most unusually, a compressed folder on a CD-ROM that one forum member had burned as a personal web archive in 2004 and never looked at since. 11 copies total, 6 distinct file hashes. When the copies were arranged chronologically, ordered by the timestamp of their archiving events rather than the dates in the metadata, something became visible that hadn't been obvious from just 3 copies. The image wasn't randomly different across versions. It was changing in a direction. The earliest archived copies consistently showed the building with the window clearly defined and the road in the foreground wet and reflective, as if photographed after rain. Later copies were drier. The pavement had no reflection, the windows less distinct, and the window on the ground floor followed its own trajectory, present in early copies, reduced to a vague shape in middle copies, gone entirely in the most recently archived versions. Something had been disappearing, version by version, across 7 years of archiving. The question was whether that something had been in the original photograph, or from the building itself. This is where the investigation stopped being about JPEG compression and started being about something harder to explain. R_H_archive ran the metadata next. EXIF data is embedded inside JPEG files at the point of capture. It records the camera model, the date and time, GPS coordinates if the device logged them, and if the image was edited after it was taken. The software used to make those edits. The 11 copies each had EXIF data. None of it was consistent. The earliest copies referenced a consumer digital camera from the early 2000s, a model that was plausible for that period. A middle period copy referenced a different camera model entirely, one that hadn't been released until at least 2 years after the building's estimated demolition date. One copy had no camera information at all, due to only a software field referencing an image editing application with no date attached to it. One photograph, taken once by one camera on one day. The metadata didn't agree on which camera, which day, or whether a camera had been involved at all. Someone found an old blog post, not from 2021 when the investigation started, from 2009. A short entry, 3 paragraphs, posted on a personal blog that had since gone offline but survived in a partial archive cache. The author was describing a photograph they had found on an old website. They described the building. They described the road. They mentioned the window. Not as something strange, as something they had noticed and photographed themselves separately years earlier. They said the building had been a local administrative office. They said it had been demolished sometime around 2004 or 2005. The blog post was written in 2009, and it mentioned the photograph as a curiosity, the only surviving image of the building that they knew of. If the building had been demolished in 2004 or 2005, then the photograph had been taken before that. And the versions of the image where the window was missing, where the wall was clean concrete with no window at all, those versions had archived timestamps from 2006 was 2007, 2008. They showed a wall that had never existed in the original building. 2 months after the original post, Cartwright_Diggs checked one of the archive services again, not to find new copies, just to confirm the ones they already had documented. One of the copies had changed, not the file, not the hash. He ran it immediately and it came back different from any of the 6 hashes they'd cataloged. The archive timestamp said the copy had last been captured in 2007, but the hash was new. Whatever file the archive was now serving under that URL was not the file that had been there when the investigation started. He posted about it immediately. R_H_archive responded within an hour. This is the part that concerns me most. If archived versions can change after they've been captured, then nothing we've documented is stable. We've been treating the archive as the record, but the archive might be the problem. 3 realistic explanations remained by the end, and none of them fully satisfied the evidence. The first, the image had been copied across multiple websites in the early 2000s, and different versions had been edited, either intentionally or by hosting platform automation. The archive services had each captured whichever version happened to be available on that server on that day. The second, the archive services themselves had served different versions to different users through caching errors, server migrations, and undocumented technical processes. The third explanation was the one nobody wanted to say directly, but R_H_archive put it in the final post of the thread. What if there had never been one image? What if different photographs of the same building, taken at different times, had accumulated under one file name across different servers? We've been assuming there was one original. We have no evidence of that. The forum thread was archived in late 2022. Cartwright_Diggs posted one final update before it closed. 2 of the archive services hosting copies of the image had undergone infrastructure migrations. Whatever had been stored there before the migration was no longer accessible in the same form. The number of verifiable copies had dropped from 11 to 7. The 6 distinct hashes had become 8. 2 new versions had apparently been created during the migration process, neither of which matched any of the originals. An image that had 11 copies now had 7, with 8 distinct fingerprints. We assumed that digital archives preserve what was there. We assume that a file captured in 2006 reflects what existed in 2006. We assume that when we look at an archived version of something, we're looking at history. But every copy of a file is only a record of what one server returned on one day. It is not necessarily a record of what was originally uploaded. And in the gap between those 2 things, something can change, quietly, without leaving a note.